Welcome everybody. It's time for another week of Game Wisdom Live for October 26, 2017. Joining me as always, my co-host, video game producer, Robert Leach.
Hello.
Hey Rob, how are you doing this week?
I am doing well. I will be a little bit I'm a little bit behind in my games everything just because this week's has been one heck of a busy one. So, I'll try and keep up today.
Alright. And got a few people already in chat. Hey El Gordo. Hey Josh, I think that's right. I think we're up to one, two. That's either Josh number 3 or Josh number 4. I've lost track of the number of Joshes we have on. But it has been a very interesting week. I just gave my last presentation for the fall season, talking about speedrunning, and it went well. Their internet connection is not as good as mine, which unfortunately caused some quality issues throughout the chat. But I did manage to get it recorded, and I will be posting that, I believe, either tomorrow or Saturday. And as a special gift for anyone who donates to the Patreon, even just the dollar donations, they'll be able to watch that as an unlisted video here on YouTube. And that was the first time I gave the presentation for speedrunning as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Also, this week has also been a bit crazy with games played. I actually did a speedrun attempt of Cuphead, and apparently I didn't do too bad. Like that was be my second attempt through it, and Josh in chat suggested I install LiveSplit. That's the professional thing that the YouTubers and streamers use for recording times. So I guess I'm going to have to become a speedrunner next. I guess that's going to be the next little title underneath my thing between writer, blogger, podcaster, YouTuber, streamer, I guess live stream. I'll have to think of some few more titles. My business card's going to get very busy by the end of this year. Just like give them like a little parchment. Okay, here's everything that I do. It goes down to the floor.
You're just going to need a different business card for all of them. Just one each.
Oh yeah, just have them different colors. I do actually need to get new business cards. I have, if you guys want to see, this is the generic one that I've been using. Still have like tons of them that were printed up, but I'll put this up to the camera for everyone to gaze and be amazed at. There we go. And then of course the coins on the back there. So this is, and that's actually like the third set of business cards I've had printed up over the years. And every time I get them printed up, things change, things get updated, so I have to basically get new cards. So I'm gonna have just like 8,000 cards at like just of varying styles throughout the year at the rate that I'm going.
Hey, at least they're good for potential free lunches at restaurants. That's what I always say.
That is true. I should just carry like a few of them whenever I go out. You never know. Maybe I'll win something from one of those little raffles they like to give out.
Yeah.
Let's see. So the presentation went well. It's the first time running, and what was very interesting, I had like a few men like age, I think they're like 25, maybe 26, and I had a boy as young as 8 who was watching me talk about speedrunning, who started doing it on his own time, which is just amazing. And he's probably better than me too. He was talking about, oh, I beat Super Mario 64 in like 2-3 hours. I'm like, it took me like 8 or 10 hours to do that when I played it. And then he even knew about Earthbound, and he was trying to ask me some plot related questions. I'm like, no, we can't do that here. We'll be here all night long. And we actually ran long with all the videos I showed. But it looks like, from what they're telling me, I actually have to get back in touch with my contact, that they don't schedule any presentations for the winter season because they're afraid, snow or weather events will cause it. I'm going to try to see if they wouldn't mind doing like a virtual presentation, maybe. Just something to do during the winter season. But everyone seems to like them, so I guess I'm going to keep doing them for the next time.
That's a good deal.
And also, in some good news, we hit another milestone on the YouTube channel. We're over 2,400 subscribers. I think we're at 2,409 or 2,410 last I checked. 2,409.
Very nice.
We are getting up there. Hey, Sungam, thanks for coming on. So we're certainly getting there. The next big goal is, I guess, 3,000. So we'll need to see what happens when we get there. Now,
Yeah.
in terms of games played and things to talk about, I had a pretty productive week, so I'll throw it over to you, Rob, first. Have you had any chance to play any new games
Oh
or keeping
gosh.
up?
Nope, not at all. This week has been just a painful week, and this whole weekend is going to be lost because I'm not going to be able to stream. It's just one of those weeks.
Yeah. I hear you there. I still need to get back to writing that ebook. I'm on number 13 or 14 of 20, so I'm getting there. It's
Yeah.
just taking a while with everything else that I've been doing. So, games that I've been playing, it's been one of those very interesting weeks. That's great. 3,000, I need to get a world record on a speed run. Alright. Maybe at 4,000, we'll perform like a medley. We'll do
Well,
some singing.
there's a trick to getting a world record
Mm-hmm.
that I think is tried and true. Find a game that no one's ever played, and you're shoe in. That's all you need to do.
Alright. I need to think of something. Maybe. I know. I'll check the my ever growing Steam backlog. Let's see.
Sun called it. I can't even join our the RNG gods stream on Friday nights. For me, it's Friday nights, but Saturdays, I guess. Ugh, I'm so out of it.
And Josh is saying we need to get, or second Josh said we need to get this Josh on the AGDQ for next year. I would be for. That would be certainly interesting. It would also be really great for the presentations. I can say, hey, here's me. I can put up my video there. Speedrun one of those old FMV games.
Yeah,
There we go.
that's
I
great.
know. I'll speedrun Dragon's Lair. Perfect. I'm sure no
The
one's.
11th hour.
Oh yes, Mist. Let's do speedrun of Mist.
Get them
Perfect.
all.
So games that. Oh goodness, speedrun Armageddon Empires. Whoo, wait, that's a good one. Do you know what Armageddon Empires is, Rob?
I don't.
Oh my, that was the first game from Cryptic Comet. Vic Davis. He made some very interesting strategy and turn-based games, and it's basically a turn-based real-time turn-based strategy game meets a collectible card game because all the units, buildings, and such are part of your deck. And they came with different factions, different mega events that can happen during a game, and it was really great. It's also very complicated, very challenging to get into, but that was a game that really turned me on to him, as well as Soleum Infernum and Occult Chronicles, which I keep saying I would love to do a spotlight on, but I know he's not making video games anymore, so it's such a shame about that. El Gordo
Yeah.
saying speedrun Hatful Boyfriend. I could do that Doki Doki Literature Club that I was telling you guys about in chat too. That would be a fun one. I have to be careful though. I can't mention visual novel games because I know people will vote for that on the Saturday night grab bag just to watch me suffer.
Minesweeper.
How about Solitaire? I'm sure there hasn't been. What's the speed run? What's the world record on Solitaire?
I'd probably say it's like less than 20 seconds. I bet.
But as I was saying, Josh was telling me I should install that live split, so I think I'll take a look at that over the weekend and see what I can do there. 7 seconds advanced Minesweeper. I have never been Minesweeper at all. It was part of that game I did a spotlight of, Destination Ares, from a few weeks ago. It had like a Minesweeper-esque minigame of how you solve situations. Now, I guess some other games I've been playing this week. It's been a really good week for game completion. I beat both Hob and SteamWorld Dig 2, both on the same night. You guys watching live, you saw me play through most of the mid to end game, and then I just spent the rest of the night and beat it on my own. I really enjoyed the SteamWorld series. Have you played any of those, Rob?
I don't think so. No, I was actually curious what you thought of Hob, and it must is it short? It seems like either one or the other, or both must be short.
It is on the short side. I think it was only about like 6 hours long, and
Ah,
that was me spending a lot of time fumbling around trying to find it. There's a speedrun achievement. Again, we're getting back to speedrunning here for 5 hours to beat it in. It's kind of like an open world action platformer. I think a lot of people describing it very similar to Breath of the Wild from Zelda. That you have this world, they don't really tell you what to do, and then go. You know, just go out there and find stuff. but it's
Yeah.
still kept relatively linear. Like you can't do this until you get this upgrade. You can't go to here, and it's an interesting game. I think you know that it's from Runic Games, obviously the makers of
Yeah.
Torchlight. So it's a complete departure from their normal games. I liked it, but it's one of those things where I've seen better examples of it, like either like the exploration of like Breath of the Wild, or even like that kind of here's this world to explore, like Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah.
And the weird part, I know El Gore, you can probably agree with me on this. The combat, I think, was the weakest part of that game, which is weird considering their pedigree of ARPG design and combat like that. But obviously, as we all know, ARPG combat and real-time combat are two very different beasts to deal with.
Now, how do you distinguish between the two since ARPG is real time?
It's it's not skill. It's not like a hotkey or hotbar base. You're actually hitting the attack button. You have to dodge,
Oh, I see.
and it just never felt engaging. I think we've talked about this before with like Metroidvania design and how the
Hmm.
new abilities become integrated. A good action game, all the moves kind of flow together. Like you see this in Devil May Cry,
Yeah.
Ninja Gaiden, and so on. In this game, they don't really connect. Like I hit a dash, but I can't really do anything before or after that dash. Or I have this move that lets me like grab like these armor points on enemies, but it has no other purpose in combat. Like I can't do like a scorpion get over here move with it. Like it just feels very. It feels like pieces of a whole, but nothing is connected together.
Yeah.
Like when you see, or actually like with SteamWorld Dig, for instance, or SteamWorld Dig 2, like every move feeds into each other. Like when I get the hook shot, I can grapple around, I can pull myself towards enemies, I can do this, this, and that. And then I can use the grenade launcher. Like everything works together. I was trying to think of a really good Metroidvania example, and my mind is failing me. Oh man, something like Omega Strike, a robot named Fight. Like it feels like once you get this new weapon or this new ability, everything it becomes encompassed by it. Or even something like Castlevania Symphony of the Night. When you
Yeah.
start getting like the different powers, you can use them in more than one situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as Sungam is saying, I think another thing that really hurts the game is the camera. They went with a fixed camera, so you have no control over it.
Ooh.
So there were cases where I'm looking over here and the camera is pointing the complete opposite direction, and it's like, how the heck am I supposed to deal with that?
Like it has fixed camera in the sense of an ARPG, like Diablo or Torchlight, or is it a fixed camera in the sense of an original Devil May Cry? Like,
Yeah, like Devil May Cry, Resident
my
Evil.
God. I
Like
thought
it's
we'd moved beyond that.
like you'll be walking, and all of a sudden the camera goes from facing like this to then just like turns immediately.
Oh,
And
God.
you guys, for those of you who watched from the early plays, you like saw like I would jump in one direction, the camera would adjust itself while I was in midair. I would just completely
Oh, jeez.
overshoot the platform and die. Now, fortunately, there are a lot of checkpoints, so it's not like super frustrating to play. But again, it's one of those things where it's not all working together. Like we've talked about this before, but when you're playing a great game and everything feels like it's working in tune with each other.
Yeah.
And this one, it just didn't. And one of the strangest parts of this game, and El Gore, you were watching me when I was doing that, at one point in the game, they give you directions. Go to this point on the map, go here, go there, and then all of a sudden, it just stops. There's no direction. And it just felt weird.
Oh my
Get
God.
good there, Rob. I think
Wow,
that's
I'm
what.
getting hammered today.
Well, at least it's not me. Well, I'm the professional speedrunner now, so I think what that means is, from now until next Thursday, you need to do a world record. You need to have
Oh.
some world record attempt to.
I can do that. Venture forth. I will do that. No one will know what it is, but I will do it. Done. World record.
Yeah, and that was like the thing with Hob. Like, it doesn't feel like you can tell. I think that this was like their first time working on a game like this, and it's one of those things we talked about before. But just because you design one game doesn't mean you are perfect with all games. Every design has its own unique feel and its own unique considerations. Like, just because your company made the best Super Meat Boy clone doesn't mean you can then turn around and make the best Res clone, or
Right.
so on and so forth.
I would, by the way, to Sun's point, I would totally speedrun Zavix Tower. I
I
just
was
don't
actually
have
going to say
the
that
day.
too.
Yeah, that would take a while. Venture Forth is much more speedrun friendly, but less known by a long shot. Um, Sorry, what was it you're just saying? I
About
had to
the
respond.
different genres and how
Oh,
have
right.
different
Yeah.
designs.
See, this is my problem with that particular thing, because I totally believe if you've
Hmm.
been involved in one game project, you can totally be involved in another, but it is recognizing exactly what you just said. It's
Hmm.
knowing that you aren't necessarily familiar with this. I gave you a copy of that, son.
Hmm.
Um, it's I think I did anyway. But it's knowing what your like limitations are. You know Torchlight 2. You just know it, right? Um, or
Hmm.
you know Torchlight series. That's what you've done. That's what you know. You know all that stuff.
Hmm.
But you're going to venture into this adventure type game. Maybe you bring someone on to
You
partner
do
with,
research into it as
do
well.
research, spend a year or two prepping and just figuring out all the systems you have to do.
Hmm.
Play every damn game out there. I know when I jumped into, because been in a variety of genres when I've
Hmm.
worked in this business. Like when I went to Disney, actually, the first time I really did this in depth was I was at Way Forward, and I was doing a SpongeBob SquarePants educational game. I watched every damn episode of SpongeBob SquarePants and wound up co-writing the script for the game.
Hmm.
And the Nickelodeon people were like, "Yes, that's perfect." And I did the same at Disney. I researched everything. I watched every Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and Princess movie and
Oh.
Tinkerbell show, and like I knew everything at that time. I've forgotten it all since. That's my superpower. But like you got to, like, you can't just assume you know the genre. And I'm making a lot of assumptions here. It's very possible he did that and just ran into all the bottlenecks that
Hmm.
traditional game production runs into. But it does, from what you guys say, it sounds like he just didn't know exactly what he wanted to do with the genre. Or wow. For those of you who are watching this later, Sun is laying into me right now.
Oh, they can
Um,
see the chat. They
oh,
can enjoy
oh,
it all in the corner.
great. But no, exactly. I just feel like, yes, you need to do everything in your power to understand to
Hmm.
understand what's going on and what you're trying to do.
Hmm.
It's professionalism. That's what
Yeah.
the word is
Yeah.
that you have to attain here.
Yeah, and we talked about that before with Clockwork Empires from
Yeah.
Gaslamp Games. And now their first game was a 2D roguelike RPG. And then their next game was a fully 3D Dwarf Fortress clone with, complex animations and multiple systems of interaction and resource gathering.
Yeah.
And it just sunk them. But I know we talked about this before, there's always that allure to go big. What are you going to do next? And we we mentioned that before with stuff like Undertale or Stardew Valley. Like the first game, like I always say this, like I'm not really impressed until I see what their next game is after going big. I enjoyed
Mm.
Undertale and Stardew Valley, yes, but there's always that thought in the back of your mind of, was this a one hit wonder? Was this just, that lightning strikes perfect combination, the Rube Goldberg S machine that just magic all work properly? Or does this person have the talent to keep doing this and going forward and so on?
Yeah, it's just the mentality of
Hmm.
business over, I
Hmm.
wouldn't call it hobby, but this is the game you want to do versus
Hmm.
the game that comes after the game you wanted to do, the game that actually establishes yourself as long term, like you
Yeah.
say. And
Hmm.
yes, towards what Sun said,
Hmm.
oh boy, yeah, this is my thing and my way or the highway, and yeah, then it's broken. We've spoken
Yeah.
about quite a few projects like that,
Hmm.
it seems.
Oh yes, and I mean I've talked to people like Z from Serenity Forge and Jake Burgett from Grey Alien Games about that, And there are a lot of people who have that trouble of understanding, you know, how do I turn this from just me making video games with my friends to I have an actual business. This is going to support me and my household for this
Yeah.
foreseeable future. I mean,
Yeah.
Jake Burkett is a really great example of that. I mean, we talked about Shadowhand, that game that I'm really excited about. That would be like I think 5 6 months ago, and he said it was only like 2 or 3 months out. He's still trying to get that finished. I think I think according to his Twitter, he almost has that done. But he is someone with over 15 years of experience making video games. If anyone understands the ins and outs of what it means to make a game, I think he has that in the bag. But if someone like him has underestimated his time, what about someone who's just getting in for their first, or oh, I'm sorry, what we're talking about now, second game?
It's time estimation is a
Mm-hmm.
hell of a thing. There are people who have been doing this for decades and decades, and I don't feel like time estimation is one of those things that you learn.
Mm-hmm.
You either accept it or you don't. It's really more of a willpower kind of thing because nobody likes to say, well, it's going to be a year. Even though with your skills and everything, if time were perfect,
Mm-hmm.
you'd be able to do it in 2 months. But the
Yeah.
fact is, it never works out that way, and you just got to know in your head that you have to pad it significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, padding is one thing, but like knowing what's going to happen is another, and that's a whole like that is not his job. That is someone else's job in
Mm-hmm.
his company.
Yeah.
And people who've been doing this for decades will come out and say, "Well, yeah, that'll be done very quickly," because I'm just excited about it. But it takes a little bit of willpower to step back and be like, okay,
This is
let's
going.
be real here. I don't want to just shout it out.
Yeah.
I hate when that happens. I hate that.
And
So
to answer Sungam's question about Shadowhand, that is a RPG with solitaire-based systems being done by Jake Burkett. If you check Steam, I know it has a store page for it, but I don't know off the top of my head when it's actually coming out. Again, he's been working on this for a while now. When we last spoke, he said this was going to be his, big Steam friendly game that he wanted to get on the platform. So we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, getting back to the topic, like something like Hob, for instance, it's very hard, like when you're switching genres like that, to really know, the ins and outs of what makes it work. I mean, to like take us back to speedrunning for a second, I thought just being able to watching world record holders for Cuphead, I thought that would have been enough for me to be able to replicate that. And it's not. There's a lot of precision and timing that it comes from playing. It comes from actually getting dirty with that.
yeah.
And I need to look into that. Rob, do you know this? Like, is there a setting that lets links go up in chat, or did YouTube just block that entirely?
See, I have no idea. Oh yeah, I mean, I know that in, of course, Twitch you get to approve as the admin, but yeah, I have no idea what YouTube does.
Yeah, I know it's blocking spam messages. Like, that's on there just to stop things, but yeah, I'm not sure why it's blocking all links. I know even I can't do a link myself.
Oh, great. You're gonna spam your own page.
Exactly. Let me see. Anything else regarding Hub before we go on? Yeah, so I liked it, but I think it does have that limited appeal, at least compared to the other examples on the market.
Mhm.
And as we've said before, all the little things that can annoy you or do annoy you about a game can come back to sour the experience.
Yeah.
And I guess on a brighter side, I really enjoyed Steam World Dig 2. It's basically this follow up to the first game, so it's kind of like a Metroidvania, but you're digging. You're exploring like the ground. You're trying to dig up new resources, which you then sell for new gear, which then lets you go further, and so on and so forth. And it does a really good job of that core gameplay loop. Like, and I was saying this, and I'll probably say it in my review. Like, it's one of those games where you play for 5 to 10 minutes, and it just feels great in your hands. So you want to keep playing it for another 10 minutes, and another, and so on. Like, it never feels like I'm waiting for things to get good. Like something like we see this in a lot of other games where like I have to, be in that mood to play. Like I can't just sit down and enjoy it. I have to
Yeah.
sort of like build up to get to that point, and I just don't feel that with SteamWorld Dig. What is Smashcast? Is that another streaming platform?
Is that the Microsoft one? I always forget.
Again, there's so many out there. I mean, we just started getting serious with this Discord about like 3 months ago. So, and I was telling the people at the presentation, I'm still old man when it comes to smartphone, trying to figure out why it wasn't streaming right. While we're waiting for him to respond, yeah, so we finished Hob. I finished Steam World Day. Oh, as a very interesting point, apparently I just got a press key for the Darkest Dungeon DLC. They released a new
Ooh,
class.
very nice.
Um, oh, Smashcast is basically Twitch without the scumbaggery. Well, I'm not on Twitch anymore, so thankfully that I don't have to worry about anything there. I don't know. For you guys watching live record, let me know what you think about that. I know Twitch just did like some big event where they're having like people being able to like submit or affect the game they were playing. So I guess things are still going really well there. Of course, they had TwitchCon I think last weekend.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to go so bad, but then I realized, wait a minute, I'm not a pro Twitcher, and I'd just be wasting time and money. So, although I heard that it was, God, who was telling me that it was just a miserable experience?
Mm.
It was like, son, I don't know if it was you or someone on Discord, or if it was someone I had a conversation. Oh, it was someone I had a conversation with at work. Apparently, there were, because it's TwitchCon, you have everyone
No.
who's a streamer, and everyone's trying to live stream everything. So it's just basically this giant nuisance of the other one. No, I just remembered it was
There's
at
a
work.
there's another Rob. There's three Joshes.
Oh,
I
there's
know it.
several Bobs on the Discord, yeah, that I'm on.
I know
So
a few Bryans too as well. Everyone seems to just have like the same name around me.
that's what we should
Exactly.
do. Just everybody has the same name, makes it easy. You can remember their names. Pretty simple.
Clones are everywhere. I know. Yeah, so with the Darkest Dungeon DLC, I was thinking about maybe doing another stream of it just to show off what that's all about. I don't think I want to do another full play of it because, oh my goodness, that's another, what, like 35, 40 hours, especially if I play it on, I was thinking about doing it on hard mode. So that's good, 70, 80 hours. I'm sure everyone wants to see me suffer through the Darkest Dungeon again there.
Yeah, it sounds. I enjoy you playing it. It's a game that I have not yet had a chance to play myself, and it's a very interesting aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. And maybe I'll try another Cuphead run once I sort out Live Split and all that. Let's see, any other... no, I've not heard of Dark Quest 2. Well, I'll take a look at it after this. Oh, I did get a game that I did a first look on. Something tells me I don't think anyone here has heard of it yet. I actually have to pull it up 1 second. Have you guys heard of the game Gladabots?
Gladabots?
Yeah.
I have not.
It's a it's a asynchronous multiplayer game where you run a team of robots, and the hook is you program all the AI behaviors for each robot on your team.
Wow.
So you set up, it's all done visual style, Gladabot, and so there's no actual programming. So you set like these little nodes like on a page, like if attacker is in short range, do this attack. If your health is at this point or it's here, you set that up. It kind of reminds you a lot of like Frozen Synapse or Laser Squad Nemesis. I always forget that. With how it's more about you making plans rather than you actually playing the game at that moment. And
Yeah.
I was telling Ogoro this, I was saying this on Twitter, like, for some reason, I think because I played Space Chem, all the indie developers now think I'm this hotshot puzzle programming virtuoso. So I'm getting all these press keys for puzzle games. I'm like, shouldn't I be known for platformers by now? Did no one watch me play Dark Souls or Cuphead? Give me more of those games. Or all the
Nice.
Metroidvania games. I mean, how many have I looked at?
Yeah.
Sometimes I just makes up
Just
these
mix them
games.
up. That's what I think. That's what I think.
Well, I actually record footage of it and it should be going up either Friday or Saturday. So I haven't made that one up just yet. Exactly. I'm gonna get my brain melted. I know when I played Space Game, I could feel like the fumes of the smoke, the overheating smoke in my brain starting to go off there. And we also have to play more of Opus Magnum, the game from, again, from Zachtronics' Space Chem fame. So maybe tonight we'll do a Darkest Dungeon or Opus Magnum play. Yep, I saw your suggestion there, Algora, and oh, this is one, especially with your doing like video game producing, Rob. You're gonna love this. El Gordo sent me a link to a Metroidvania game. I went to look it up to send the developer a press request, and they have no website whatsoever.
Oh,
Couldn't even find any word from this developer on Google,
wow.
and that's never a
That's
good sign.
no. I mean, certainly there's a couple of
Hmm.
things that can happen. I know just from my own experience, because I'm not the best person at keeping up websites and stuff. Sometimes you mean to get to it, never do, and you're focused on the task at hand. So there's a lot of possibilities, but yeah, when you want to show your stuff off, you
Hmm.
should kind of have that set up.
Yeah. And I need to finish more fighting Axiom Verge. So maybe we'll do like Darkest Dungeon tonight. Friday night, maybe we'll try more Fire Axiom Verge and go from there. Also, for you folks watching this, the Saturday Night Grab Bag, the first round voting is closed. So any VIP patrons watching, the spreadsheet is now up for the second round. One of my friends, who's a big Total War fan, he voted for one of those games, which I'm pretty sure will blow up my computer if I try streaming at the same time. I still have to get around to Total Warhammer. I think I got that on sale a while ago, and I never had a chance to play it. I know they're already
Well,
making a number two, I think.
yeah, that's yeah, I don't know. So I got distracted by the comments. Google Foo is my favorite right now.
The website was only in Danish. Oh boy. Oh yeah, I've seen some crazy developer websites over the years. As a quick funny story, I remember a long time ago I was at a IGDA meeting and this woman came up to me and we were thinking about doing some kind of like art for like this little pet project I was trying to make with a bunch of people. And she gave me like her card. She gave it to like another guy. He said, look at it when you have a chance. And so I got home and he called me and goes, "We're not using that one." I'm like, "Why? Just look at our website." And I went on. It looked like one like those like websites like you saw like a serial killer, with everything
Oh
all
no.
messed up. And
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God.
it looked like something like David Fincher would have done for Seven. That's how disturbing it looked. I'm like, and then like the artwork, I was like, oh my god.
I was gonna say GeoCities, son.
Yes. Let's see. So yeah, I think we'll do Darkest Dungeon tonight. I'm sure that should get some people excited, especially if I can get to the point where I can show off the new class, because I have not looked at it at all. So that should be a lot of fun. Let me see. Any topics we should discuss? I know we always have a big one I want to get to. And in fact, what's our time? Whew, jeez, it feels like we just started talking.
I know it does.
Oh, I forgot to tell you, I was talking about this on Discord. I went to this bargain bookstore that popped up like right behind me. They have like those hardbound collections of various comic book stories and such. So I thought this would be a good chance to try and dip my finger into the whole comic book industry. And my goodness. What? No, we're not covering that one.
Oh God. The I did see that on Discord. I'm kind of in your boat with regards to comic book experience.
Hmm. Yeah. And like I went in there, it's like I see there's like five different books or five different collections with the Incredible Hulk and
Sheesh.
10 different prefix Spider-Mans and X-Men. It's just like I can just see this being a nightmare for someone brand new. And I've said this before, and you guys who people watching know, like, my only experience with comic books is from, like, video games, TV shows, and movies. And, like, I have no recollection of the comic books. So I got a book, I think it was, like, Fall of the Hulks. Because I wanted to try to get into the Incredible Hulk after, like, seeing all the movies and the video games about it. But, yeah, it was just, like, so confusing as to what I was looking at. And, like, you can't even go by, like, what's on there. Like, like Amazing Spider-Man, there's Superior Spider-Man, there's something else. And it just makes me really glad that the video game industry has unique names for their titles. Like, it's not like Super Mario, Amazing Mario, Wonderful, Beautiful Mario.
Yeah, it's a certainly an uphill battle to get into that stuff. Yeah, hi Rafi.
Hi, Rafi. Thanks for coming on. Humor in games. How do you best design a game that feels like it takes itself less seriously? Still uses a serious story, but feels lighthearted during play. Ooh, boy, that is a really good question.
It's honestly when I approach, because I'm an amateur writer and my wife is a professional writer, and obviously Josh is a writer as well. But in terms of like fiction, I'm a big believer in mixing it up. So if you do have, like you say, a very serious toned story, you should lighten it up here and there because that's good balance in terms of writing. So I guess what you should do is just based on your characters and your scene and everything that makes sense, because you don't want to leave the actual world that you've written. You want to just kind of try and push some of those characters into having a more lighthearted personality, and that way you can kind of lean on them. Like you always have that particular the Joker, the jester, as it were. Shakespeare used that all the time in his tragedies. And that person wound up usually being the tragic part of the story. But like that is where you kind of lean on for humor. You have that one kind of the comic relief who comes in and just at the right moments lightens the mood a little bit. So I mean, without really giving you a very specific instruction of how to do it, that's kind of a way to go. Point yourself in that direction. And just let your story, let your characters, let your scenarios and world kind of give you those little directions that you can use.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say on the subject.
Yeah, I know. Humor is so challenging to do. Right? Like, for me, like, I find that I'm only, like, very few shows and stuff that I watch have actually made me laugh out loud. Like, I was thinking about, like, in terms of, like, animated shows, like Gravity Falls, Bob's Burgers, stuff like that. But again, it's always tricky to figure out, what's going to make people laugh and what's going to, go over like a lead balloon. Josh brought up about the game Brothers. Did you play Brothers yet, Rob?
No, I think that I know what he's referring. I think I know the game he's referring to, though. I think I played, heard about it a while ago. Is what I'm saying.
But yeah, Brothers will be a game like it looks very peaceful, looks very lighthearted. And then things get very disturbing in that game. And there's definitely, I'm sure, with your experience as writing with this as well, Rob, there's also games that have, played with those contradictions. Like a very cutesy art style, but very, very dark story. Yeah. Or vice versa. I mean, we were talking about that with Cuphead. Like, the animation looks all jolly and happy, and then you have stuff like them putting salt and pepper on the boss because he's dead. And that was just... And Agora loved with the Sally Songray, the one where you're fighting on like a stage and like she gets married and then you kill her and then she goes up into heaven and you fight her as an angel in a nice 4-act play.
Yeah, that's very cool. And Archer is a great shout out. But with regards to that, I mean, to me, they took that style of animation and they just literally, I mean, not literally, but they married it. That style of animation was always super creepy and dark in its own way, but also lighthearted and fun. But yeah, you watch some of that old stuff and boy, you'll have nightmares because sometimes it gets a little harsh. I've
said this before, I have the golden collection of all the Looney Tunes downstairs. I need to get back to watching, but I remember having stuff like the Mickey Mouse short when Pluto gets kidnapped by a mad scientist, and Mickey's like going around, there's skeletons attacking, and the mad scientist has like this butcher, no, it's not even a butcher knife, just like a giant knife that he's going to dig into Pluto. And it's amazing just how different things are today like that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll go. Old animation was racist. There are plenty of stories we could tell about that.
Yeah.
And like humor in video games, like I think the go-to example has been the adventure game genre, and especially the stuff from Double Fine. Like Double Fine has done some really great stuff with their world building. Like we said this before with Brutal Legend being a great example, Psychonauts, and of course Thimbleweed Park that came out earlier this year from Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick, the guys who made the original Monkey Island and Maniac Mansion games. And they did a really good job with writing that.
Yeah, and I mean, just like what you said, I go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
I go back to the LucasArts games because I thought, and even the Sierra games had a bit of a dry wit, but there was one particular scene in Monkey Island, which the Monkey Island 2 for me is the best. But like, there's a scene in Monkey Island when you're standing at the edge of a cliff, and it cracks, it crumbles, and you fall down. And then a little pop-up window, if you're familiar with the Sierra games, said, "Uh-oh, you died. I hope you saved your game." You know, and it's restart, retry, load game are the three options. That's your typical Sierra game. And then in the background, little Guybrush Threepwood pops right back up, lands on the thing, the pop-up goes away, and he goes, "Rubber Tree." And that was the scene for me, and I was cracking up because like I was a big Sierra fan back in the day. But it's little nods, I think, to fans that are tremendously helpful. Easter eggs, that kind of stuff can really help you in a time when you actually don't have anything jokey to say. Just something for fans to notice, I guess.
Yeah. But you do, I think, also have to be careful with keeping it to the tonal consistency of these characters. Like,
Yes.
one of the things that drives me crazy about like a lot of like the anime movies that are coming out these days is they always throw in pop culture references that
That's
have no place in that world.
Yeah.
It just seems like they're really forcing that humor instead of trying to write something funny for those characters.
Yeah, it is. Certainly, like if you, in that particular circumstance where he's on a cliff and that happens, like it's a good nod. But if it's like a seriously very dark and dismal thing, well, you can throw a sign that might be in another game that's just a nod to that game. And it does break the mood a little bit for someone who notices such a thing, but might also just mesh with the background otherwise.
Having like black humor, for instance, in a horror game could be really helpful. Or, I mean, speaking about like Halloween, like the Evil Dead movies have always been about very dark humor of Ash getting beaten up in all hilarious forms. You know, like
Yeah.
that. I know with Army of Darkness, they really try to marry slapstick comedy with people are getting killed and the dead are rising from the grave kind of situation.
Yeah, that's a classic one. The thing that burned me a little bit was when they went to Serious Sam as a game, and it was basically just ripping off all those one-liners from Army of Darkness. I know a lot of people thought Serious Sam was hilarious, but I saw 5 minutes. I'm like, they're just ripping off all the same jokes.
Yeah.
How is that? I don't get it.
Yeah. And like for me, I really like. I'm not even sure how I would describe the humor that I like. Like I will always say like Gravity Falls. Have you ever seen that animated show yet, Rob?
It's on my list.
Oh,
It's not one I've seen. It's on my list. You mentioned Bob's Burgers. Yeah,
Yeah.
I watch that all the time.
Like it's very hard like to describe like what kind of humor. Like I do like dry humor, like witty humor. But like all of a sudden, like when a character will say something just like completely out of the blue, but still fits that character kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like Homer, like in the classic Simpson, when Homer all of a sudden like have some amazing pearl of wisdom, like the classic scene with Apu when he properly defines what karma is, or the difference between envy and jealousy, or stuff like that. Oh.
Yeah, it is nice when the characters really get used to their full potential.
Yeah. I did hear about that. Ash versus Evil Dead season 3 starts. What was that? February 18th. Huh, that's good. I watched the first 2 seasons of it so far. I liked it.
How is it?
It definitely feels like more Evil Dead. Although I've heard there was some controversy surrounding the finale of season 2. Apparently, the showrunner was either fired or kind of suggested to leave at the end, so they had to completely redo the ending for season 2. And you can tell that something happened. Like it just feels like everything was rushed, like at the last minute. So I'm hoping that season 3 tries to keep the consistency all throughout.
Yeah, a change up in the writing staff does wonders for a story.
Yeah, I know a Doctor Who, I think, is coming back in a few months. I think they're going to do they always do the annual Christmas show, and then they're going to replace Peter Capaldi at the end there. So that's going to be very interesting. It's going to be the first female Doctor. So we'll wait to see what controversy and rage erupts over the internet then. Getting back to the whole comics thing, yeah, it was just weird. Like, I had, again, having no experience with any of that, I'm like looking at these books. It's like, okay, it says Incredible Hulk Collection 601 to 615. This one's Incredible Hulk something saga 5 through 8. I'm like, what am I looking at here? Like, how do you get started? I know Josh suggested on Discord just find like characters you like and get those books. I was only there's like 3 or 4 different compilations of Incredible Hulk books. I saw like 6 different Avengers. And of course, it's not even the same Avengers as the movies. Now, I'm not that comics noob to know that they have been different teams. But it's very interesting. I think you and Josh were talking about this on Discord, just how much a difference like the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been and its growth compared to the comic book side, and how the comic books have changed and evolved.
Yeah, it's to me it's a mess because like what you say is where do you get started? Like I'll come in, I'll be like, oh, I want to read more about Spider-Man, and even if just like go Spider-Man proper, you're coming in at issue like 25,000 or something like that. And for me, I can't not start at 1, and being comic books, you can't start at 1 anymore. It's just
unless you spend a lot of money.
You spend a lot of money, so basically you're stuck starting in the middle, and I don't know. It's kind of like a soap opera where it's just been going on every single day for decades, and you jump in, you're like, okay, who are these people? There's a history here. I have no idea who they are.
And that's why it's been such a great thing to see like really great animated series like Justice League, Batman, Superman, the like, that condense a lot of that stuff down. And I mean, heck, the video games and the TV shows have been my only real exposure to Batman, basically.
Gotcha. That's a good point, Josh.
Which Josh? This Josh or
Josh Mull. Josh, I'll just call him Mull. Josh. But yeah, I think that's a good point. I never really consider that that the writers have their own angles and stuff on these old characters.
And I've been trying to watch like various YouTubers with who cover comic books. I know there's this whole big hoopla with like Marvel and the whole writing that's going on as well between their fans and what people and all the changes that have been going on that front. But I'm definitely not the person to be weighing in on that, considering my experience there.
Oh, you just go to Star Wars. There's enough in Star Wars to keep you going for some time.
And then switch to Star Trek, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm sure they're both exactly the same. I'm sure no one's ever had any discussions about those two before,
exactly.
Right? Let me see. I'm sure we are getting close to the hour. I know this next topic will easily take us over an hour, but I think this will get to our final topic for the evening. And it's actually a really good segue. And it's talking about fandom and the kind of the double-edged sword of what it means to have fans and even and trying to interact with them, especially when fans become a lot more involved with the process or involved with what's the stories and such. And this is something that has definitely become a major part of just about every element of pop culture there. They all have star in common, right? Exactly, Alberto.
Well, certainly as my generation has aged, because we were the young ones when Star Wars and that came out, and I feel like Star Wars is one of those that kind of kicked this whole thing off in terms of fan base. This just ravaging that a fan will do because they are married to a particular story. Just like we grow up with Star Wars, and you get that as your identity from a kid, and so when people screw with that, they're kind of screwing with your childhood, and that has just blown people just to smithereens. And this is the same thing for Video games is you literally invest in a game. Like you spend a lot of money to get a game, and you spend an awful lot of time getting to know that game. And so when someone has the gall to misrepresent your thing, then you get passionate about it in either a positive or negative way.
Or they want to change something or adjust it for someone else.
Yeah, Kiss or Star. I just want to ignore Kiss forever. I was never a fan, but I will not prevent people from being such. But like I had mentioned before that when I started in games as a tester, I worked with what is now Take-Two Sports, Visual Concepts. They do the NBA 2K series. And back in the day, they did all the sports. And Sega Sports was their nomenclature back then when I started there. And under Sega Sports, they had a very specific UI for football. And when they switched that UI to something a little more user-friendly, boy, did the forums erupt. And this was like forums in the early 2000s. So like it was a whole different kind of thing than nowadays. But yeah, the fans, you have to decide who is your audience. Who are you? If you get rid of the fans, do you still have enough money coming in? And in a sports game, the answer is yes, kind of. But if there are people married to your specific brand and that kind of thing, you don't want to piss them off because they're the customers who are dedicated to you. They're the ones who are going to come back every single year.
Yeah.
And so there's this really weird balancing act. Like they will demand all kinds of issues. They have their own priority chart compared to what you, the designer, have.
And the other people trying to come in as well.
And the other people trying to come in as well. And in that time, they were competing against Madden. Madden was their primary competition period because everything other than football games did not matter. Football was what drove your business as a sports games maker back then. So to piss off your fans, you kind of feel like you can't because they're the ones supporting you every year, kind of, even though sports is so big that, you know, you can draw more people. But yeah, it's that same thing, like with the latest Star Trek and Star Wars and Battlefields and that kind of stuff, or Battlefront, I forget what the name is, sorry. Don't mean to dismiss it so easily, but like, yeah, when a game like that comes out, how true can you be to the universe? How true do you want to be to the universe? And are you going to be supporting this movie that's coming out that might be a little different than the universe? You're never going to avoid pissing someone off big time. But avoiding pissing everybody off big time, your biggest fans, because they're the ones who are going to make a lot of noise and they might prevent other people from coming in. But yeah, who represents the biggest voice in that community, and do you want to listen to them because they may have a horrible idea like Homer's car in The Simpsons to bring that back?
Yeah. And yeah, two really good points there, Rob. Like as you were just saying, like we see this especially in very niche-driven genres. Like one of the classic examples would be like Paradox Software with their strategy games. They have established that niche, and it is, you know, locked tight. They are really the only game in town for those kinds of games, and they have a very rabid fan base for that. And it's very tough for someone new to enter those games because they don't do any, at least from what I've seen, there is very little in terms of accommodation for someone who's never played one of those games. It's going back comic books. It's like a soap opera that's been going on for years now, and you're trying to get in, you know, year 15 of the show. How are you supposed to do it? And it just becomes harder and harder. And as you said, when you start having those very rabid fans, they can push people away. El Gordo, I think, had a really good example there with Rick and Morty. I've heard similar things from other people. The whole Rick and Morty, that McDonald's sauce incident from last month, is just a very great facepalm right there. And with the topic of fans and like that kind of backlash, it seems like it goes like into a few categories. You have fans against fans of other properties. You have fans against fans of the same property. And then you sometimes have fans against the creators of the own thing because they don't agree with a change, or they become, as you said, so invested in something that to see it being changed is like a betrayal.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a chance to answer Josh's question too.
Just real quick, I actually did not get a chance to work on any racing games. I did the minus NASCAR, did the major American sports, which is the, you know, American football, basketball, baseball, college basketball, college football, and hockey. So those were the games I worked on way back then.
Hmm. And like with fandom, like, and as I think we were saying that, and as Laura was saying, it's like it seems like newer fan shows have really gotten the
Yeah,
bad impressions as of late. I know, like My Little Pony was an example. I've heard some very interesting stories from like the Steven Universe fandom. Um, I know, oh my goodness, like Powerpuff Girls, Teen Titans, you name it. Like, it seems like it's becoming very hard to try and find people who you like these shows because you never know who you're going to talk to at the other end there. Yeah, and they were saying like it's getting for a lot of them it's getting close to fanaticism. Fanaticism. My mouth is dying on me. And like football, I know we've been talking about sports. That's another really good point. I mean, the sports. I mean, I'm sure anyone who's grown up in a football loving family knows how crazy people can get. My
yeah,
dad just basically became another person while I was watching the Eagles. Like no one could make any noise. He was yelling the whole time. And like at some point, it's like, why are you watching it at that point of just yelling?
yeah. In terms of learning
Mm-hmm.
games from a video game, yes,
Mm-hmm.
but I think this goes back to Josh, your
Mm-hmm.
videos and such on tutorials,
Mm-hmm.
because that plays a big part.
Yeah.
As a fan of football, like you say, growing up, I know American football rules like the back of my hand. And while I was working on those games, like this goes back to research, I read those rule books cover to cover. I
Mm-hmm.
read historical books cover to cover to know and understand these sports to a greater degree than I ever have. And I still don't understand the intricacies of American football. But it all depends on that tutorial. If that
Mm-hmm.
tutorial can teach you what on earth these rules mean and how
Mm-hmm.
they impact the game, more importantly, like you can know that offsides is one thing in hockey, but how do you use that to your own strategic benefit? I mean, there's icing the puck, which is a great thing to do, or there's I mean, then there's just how you line up your guys, and uh, all those little intricacies you're going to miss as a new player no matter what, but the tutorial should be able to lead you through about 80% of that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you spoke about it in great depth, and I recommend watching those old videos by Josh here.
Yeah. I think the terms I used was, what am I doing? How do I do it? Why do I do it? And if you
Yeah,
can't answer those three questions, then your tutorial is not working properly. And again, it goes back to trying to bring someone new in. And I mean, I have certainly failed out of quite a number of games because they never really explain the why part. Like, I can push buttons, that's very easily, but why am I doing this? How do I read the field? Like, going back to football, when I tried to learn, I think it was Madden and NFL, like 2K2, way back in the day, I had like no experience with football, and I had no idea what I was doing in those games. So it just got a point. I'm like, I'm watching these guys go, but what am I doing here? Like, why should I make this play? And I just gave up on it.
yeah. Just a quick correction on myself. It's not the offsides that's icing the puck. It's a two-line pass, which I know has even changed now since I've last played it. But anyway, sorry. I just
Yeah.
wanted to correct myself. But yeah, with football, the it's easy to understand. You get it in the end zone. You can kick a field goal. It's 6 points and 3 points, respectively, and you get 4 tries to get 10 yards. But things like the various defensive schemes and offensive
Mm-hmm.
schemes and fake plays and it's insanity to learn. Like just the routes that receivers have to run, and then what the offensive line does at all. It's
Mm-hmm.
just insanity and levels upon levels upon levels of strategy that like these modern football games and basketball games implement to a huge degree. But when you're a casual player coming in, like NFL
Mm-hmm.
Blitz is kind of the best way to go because it just at least it embraces the core
Mm-hmm.
and still has fun doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and Josh just made a really good point about tutorial design. We better be careful; this may turn into a tutorial lesson as well. But one of the things we've seen over the years is that YouTubers and streamers have kind of become second instruction
Yeah,
manuals for a lot of these
yeah,
games
good
because
point.
they actually explain why you're doing something. And that's a very big point. Like going back to Europa or Paradox, I watched like 3 hours of a Europa Universalis to Let's Play to even just get as far as knowing, okay, I click on this to actually invade someone. And because they're able to break those things down. And it's always very tough to do that because you never know how far you want to go. And again, we gotta be careful. That's another hour long. We can add another hour
Yeah.
to our discussion here. But
And we've spent many shows talking about tutorials.
trying to get back to the topic again on fandom, like I've even heard like things like the craziest one for me is when the fans attack the creators because they
Yeah.
don't like what the creators did with the show. That one always just boggles my mind when I hear it.
Well, I mean, there's the infamous George Lucas Phantom
Mm-hmm.
Menace. That thing, I think that epitomizes the whole culture
Mm-hmm.
by itself, and you just bring that into every little nook because I think people are more fanatic now than they ever have been. Certainly, even with Star Wars growing up in the '90s, it wasn't nearly like it is today. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
everyone like people latch onto a particular product and in great depth. They will know every little last thing about it. And yeah, when that happens, like, and it happens very frequently nowadays, you got to know how to handle it one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, yeah, the Phantom Menace did not. The comments of there did not skew their creative juices for the next two,
Mm-hmm.
but it certainly adjusted things in these last couple. So I don't know.
Yeah. And like taking this to video games, we've talked about this before with social skills and PR, that your fans are really do become a double-edged sword for your
Yes.
company. If you treat them well, they will support you and they will get the word out. But you piss them off, or if they start going off the rails, they can easily come back to bite you. And
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Oh, I was just gonna say this is another topic we've gone over, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, people are becoming fanatics even before a game comes out now, and that leads to its own brand of troubles.
Mm-hmm. The infamous No Man's Sky. We
Yes.
delayed the game 1 month, and then the developers started receiving death threats for that.
Yeah.
Or I know, like Call of Duty fans, I've heard the stories like one of the developers got a death threat because they changed the firing rate on the gun by like 0.12 seconds.
Hyphenatics. It's a good word.
Yeah. And it's very crazy as well when you're dealing with fans of games if you're trying to review the game or discuss it. Because I've had cases where fans will attack me. Like, I got reamed from people because I didn't like Let It Die or La Mulania. And oh my goodness, I've got so many get good scrub messages on Game Wisdom because of I didn't like those games. And and I think it's another very interesting part, at least from my end. There's also the challenge of the developer becoming like involved in their own fandom. Like
Yeah.
I've seen, like this is one of the very interesting things. I've like for those of you who've read my reviews or seen my videos, I don't tend to give a game slack whether I like it or not. Like I have never prescribed to fandom like that. I mean, I love Nintendo. I love Mario and Zelda. That doesn't mean that I'll ignore some of their crappier practices over the years. So when it comes to video games, I will tell it like it is, even if it's from a developer that I really liked. And I've had cases where that has gotten me in trouble with them. For
Yeah.
instance, I think Jane Jensen, the adventure game writer, she's not probably going to talk to me anymore because I didn't give Mobius a glowing review. And incidentally, I think I pissed off the guy from Watch It Eye too, and I don't even know what I did on that front. I know for sure that the I Am Bread developers don't like me anymore because in my review I said I didn't like it, and I sent it back and they never sent me another word.
No.
And oh, and one developer, this was really crazy. I made a review for his game on YouTube, and he actually took the review and posted it on the Steam forums because he wanted all the fans to see it. And I think he was trying to like incite them because I said some complaints about the game. I'm not
Yeah.
going to tell you who that developer was, obviously, but that was an interesting one. But then there was one example where the developer sent me the game, I made a review or video, and I didn't like it, and he actually thanked me by saying, I get every point you made, and it was great that you didn't, flew off the rails because of those issues. So, I think it depends on the person.
Yeah, I think you do as a developer or publisher, for example. As someone who's seen quite the variety of success stories in just 3 games that I've published, um, it's you see the passion that a developer has and their attachment to it, and you know that they get their like the feelings can get totally hurt when something doesn't go right or they get a bad
Hmm.
review or something like that. But you have to step back and you have to realize a couple of things. One, it could be very legitimate uh, criticism that could make your game better. Two, that it could be completely illegitimate
Hmm.
criticism that you have to shrug off and recognize
Hmm.
because that's the internet. Or three, it could be a glowing review that's also kind of like useless.
Yeah.
And I always like bringing up this topic. I might have brought it up before. I read a review of like it was Final Fantasy 12 or 13 years ago, and the first thing I saw was that it is a 10 out of 10. I'm like, oh my god, what magazine gives a game a 10 out of 10? And the first thing the reviewer said was, I'm a fan of Final Fantasy, but I still think this. And as soon as I read that, I'm like, okay, I get it now. 10 out of 10. Who does that these days?
Hmm.
Nobody.
Yep, and we see that like that kind of passion behind the project in all creative works, and it
Mm-hmm.
becomes a very important part of being able to separate information like that. Like when I talked with John Brieger when we did our discussions on playtesting, we mentioned about how important it is to be able to parse out that information. As you said, Rob, just because someone is saying a criticism of a game or a criticism of something, that doesn't mean you should just write that off.
Yeah.
If one person says they don't like your graphics or they find something hard to read, okay. If 500 people say they don't like your graphics and the game is hard to read, then something is going on there. And
Yeah.
as you said, overwhelmingly positive reviews offer no real value to you in terms of playtesting. You see this on Steam. There are reviews that say, like for a game, this game made me think about toast. 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's great. That helps us out a lot.
Yeah.
And that actually takes me to a really big question that I want to ask you, and I also want to ask the folks watching this live recorded about.
Yeah.
When it comes to fandom, how much should you take into account when someone is reviewing a game or a product? As in, should you let a fan or a hardcore fan look at or give a professional review on something? Or how much should someone be a fan of a product to let them look at this? Because
Well,
oh,
go ahead.
I was
You
just about to
finish
say,
up.
basically the extreme examples are you have someone who has no experience with this product, which means you can't really get a fair assessment, or you have someone who's like, this is the greatest game I've ever played. As you said, 10 out of 10, it beats everything else, and I hate all other games other than this one.
Yeah, and real quick, shout out to El Gordo.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. Criticism about the game from the developer. Yeah, I think that is an amazing difference to make
Mm-hmm.
differentiator to make certain you have.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the question, uh, if I had my druthers and I could go back in time and tell this reviewer about Final Fantasy how to actually do her review, um,
Mm-hmm.
I feel fine with her giving a 10 out of 10 from the perspective of a Final Fantasy fan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the Final Fantasy fan can know what encapsulates a Final Fantasy game and what it means to enjoy that series. But if you say that this Final Fantasy game is a 10 out of 10 for Final Fantasy fans, that is different from saying this game is 10 out of 10 for the public at large. So I feel like you need to have two reviews there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
chances are a Final Fantasy game, as good as it can possibly be, like for me, the one that brought a lot of people back in was 7.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so from like a
Mm-hmm.
non-fan standpoint, is it approachable? Is it something that's going to click with a lot of people? I mean, maybe an 8. I can't see a Final Fantasy game, which is a very niche thing these days, being a 10 or a 9 anymore. It's just an interesting way to go about it. The two
Mm-hmm.
different kind of review things. Because yeah, it's impossible to weigh as a just thumbing through PC Gaming Magazine. You see all these reviews, you don't know the history of these writers,
Yeah.
and you may not be familiar with all these titles, and the screenshots always look great or terrible or whatever. But like, if you're going purely by what reviewers say, and you just happen to have this one magazine of PC gaming, and this person gives a 10 out of 10 in this massively glowing review, and you're like, okay, I'm definitely going to try that game out. Yeah, you're going to be burned, and it really comes down to being fair and saying
Mm-hmm.
what you are and making sure you give that nod to the other perspective of things.
Yeah, and I agree with El Goro's point again, as you just said, Rob, regarding separating criticism about the game from criticism about the developer, and
Right.
the same thing, having knowledge about a genre versus just loving the lore. Like if, for instance, like another great example of that extreme fandom would be Undertale, and I'm sure there are plenty of Undertale fans who give that game a 10 out of 10 on story and how the game made them feel alone. But would they really touch on how it is to play that game? And as you said, Rob, you don't know what the background is of that reviewer. For instance, on IGN, I noticed Dan Stapleton does all the reviews for strategy games. He did them all the XComs, and I followed him from PC Gamer when he was their resin real-time strategy game reviewer. So I
Mm.
know his background. So if he likes a strategy game, I have a pretty good idea of I'm going to like that game. But what if you get someone who, like another example, like Dark Souls? There are people who are absolutely in love with Dark Souls, and they will fight you on any criticism of it. And it's always tough to separate your love of a fandom or love of a brand towards actually being able to critically look at something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is. It is a really tough thing because, like, you look at a game like Cuphead.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, Dark Souls has its own angle, but Cuphead is a very specifically art-centered angle to it. And you can look at it as a platformer, but most people are going to see the lovely, beautiful animations. And if someone reviews based on that art, if I were to review it based on the art, I'd be like 10 out of 10. But not being a hardcore platform player anymore, and watching how difficult it can be, certainly you got to take that difficulty into account. And I mean, who are you writing the article for? Sorry, it's just going in a million different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
went away from the whole developer thing as well, which was not very nice.
Yeah. And speaking about Cuphead, there's also the problem when these things are in controversy, because a lot of people will just conflate everything together. Like if
Yeah.
you have a complaint about a game or you want to say something, oh, you're agreeing with all of this stuff. But if you don't say it, then oh, you're really on their side. And it becomes very difficult to get actual criticism on something. Like
Yeah.
the Ghostbusters 2016 movie and all the crazy backlash involved with that. And I saw the movie and I didn't like it. And it wasn't for the fact that they were all female on that. But if I were to write a negative review on that, I'm sure a lot of the fans and people will say, "Oh, you didn't like it because you're sexist," or "You didn't like it because they rebooted Ghostbusters," or stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it becomes very hard to separate, that stigma or that backlash from the actual product.
Yeah. I mean, certainly to go with that particular thing, I thought it was a very strong and important milestone in cinema.
Mm-hmm.
But that's very different from it being a great movie.
Yeah.
I thought it was a decent movie. If they got rid of the name Ghostbusters, it certainly would have had less stigma attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's one of those things you really have to look at it from all the different angles. And if you decide to latch onto one, like you say, you're a sexist if you didn't like it,
Mm-hmm.
or just so married to the original or whatever. Like then you can't appreciate an actual review anymore. But if
Yeah.
you can appreciate the film history aspect, there's certainly a very strong case to be made.
Mm-hmm.
But that's again that goes into film theory. It goes into all kinds of things that I'm no longer in college, so I don't talk about that stuff much anymore. But I'm very interested in that kind of thing. But it all has its place. You have to put it all in its
Yeah.
proper container.
Mm-hmm. And I guess another interesting question about the fans and interacting is the challenges of maintaining a brand or an actual brand name or brand philosophy with your product. And this is one of the things I was like trying to follow with the whole thing going on with the comic book industry. There's this whole issue going on with how the Marvel has changed how characters work, they've changed how the stories are being told, and a lot of the fans don't like it. And it creates a very interesting situation. And you talked about this earlier, Rob, regarding who are your fans? Like, who are you trying to reach out to? And what happens when you change from that? Like, for instance, if I have a story, and it's a lighthearted adventure game or a lighthearted adventure, and we do 3 or 4 games in the series like that, and then for game number 5, I decide, you know what, I want to make this a serious horror environment. I want to go in a completely different direction. Am I, as the creator, in the right for doing that, or am I betraying my own fan base and my brand by trying to go outside the box there?
Well, I'll go ahead and tie that back to Hob again, because certainly this developer went outside of his comfort zone.
Yeah.
And for someone, if I was a hardcore Runic fan, which I'm usually not a fan of a particular place or developer, except in one very particular case. But I mean, that is his decision, and I believe that that is a valid decision. However, yes, it's married to a particular game type. Maybe you make some kind of adjustment in your language, but whatever. It's the company, they get to do that. They didn't call it Torchlight 3, so that's certainly a major thing there. I know Final Fantasy tends to go back and forth between how much drama is in a game. Like,
goodness, yes.
I loved 7. I did not like 8, and I loved 9, just because 8 felt too like drama oriented for me. But like the other one, the one that sticks out to me lately is because I'm a fan of the genre and the series. I always bring it up because whenever I can, I feel like I'm getting money for it. Is like Planet Coaster. I loved all the theme park genres, from theme park to roller coasters 1, 2, and 3, and now Planet Coaster. They of course had Roller Coaster Tycoon World, which I don't know if any of you have looked at or looked at the reviews of. There it is, a giant turd of a game, and the thing there is, do you follow the series or do you follow the developer? And I think this can go with Fallout and those guys, because that goes back and forth, and like the developer keeps switching hands every other time. So what do? Do you go with the series or the developer? Because Frontier, who did Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, went and did Planet Coaster. Roller Coaster Tycoon World was a new developer, and it was trash. I feel bad. Apparently, they're putting yet a third new team to kind of re-energize it. It sells for $20. I bought it at $60 because I'm a completely ignorant person, I guess. But like, I bought all those games last year because I was excited. But yeah, you have these two things. Who do you follow? What's the right path? Certainly, developers, you can get really into a developer, but then you get Hob, and that's a completely different experience for me. So, yeah, El Goro, there you go. Like, where do you just keep with the Fallout series, or do you like follow that particular developer? Because certainly, if you follow the developer, you might get disappointed in a series or something. So.
Yeah, and that's always one of the confusing parts, because again, that kind of stuff we normally don't discuss about with video games, especially when it comes to brand properties. Like, a good example would be like Call of Duty, how they switch off every year between, I think it was a Sledgehammer and Infinity Ward, switch between them. But if you are not really a hardcore Call of Duty person, are you really paying attention to who's the developer on that box? You're probably just saying the big honking Call of Duty whatever suffix they're up to and calling it a day. And then it gets even more confusing when you have companies like Capcom and Nintendo, where they are made up of different R&D or different teams, but you're never going to see that on there. Oh yeah, that's right. Treyarch does it too.
I used to work with Treyarch at Visual Concepts. They're a hockey game. Interesting. Sorry.
But it's always that bit of confusion, as you said. Like, if you follow a developer, like, if the this actually is a really good point. I think this will probably be another really big tangent as well if we get too far into it, but it's one of the things that we've seen with independent developers, and how a lot of them have become, like, as we've said, when it comes to brands, it's either the game itself or the studio. And a lot of indie companies these days are trying to focus on the studio being the brand, rather than being known just for one specific game or one specific style. My perfect example of that would be Clay Entertainment. Each and every one of Clay's games has been completely different from each other, but they all follow that same, animation or that art style. But no one can say that Invisible Ink plays the same way as Don't Starve. So instead of it being like I'm following Clay Entertainment because I want a strategy game or I want to play so and so, it's I follow them because I really like their games. The or as another point, like the whole Steam World, going back to Steam World Dig 2. Image and Form Games, the creators of that, they have basically created this property of Steam World. So Steam World Dig is their Metroidvania, and then Steam World Heist is a turn-based strategy game. But it's all built around like the property or like the aesthetics rather than just the design.
Yeah, I do feel like that is the important part, is to establish yourself
Mm-hmm.
as a multifaceted company, or
Mm-hmm.
one or the other. I feel like is what we all think
Mm-hmm.
of, instead of kind of both. Like, you can have a series
Mm-hmm.
and still explore other things, but it is a hard leap to go. I think it's easier to go like you're a multifaceted developer and then have a series based on one of yours. I think that's an easier place to go.
Mm-hmm.
um, I get, oh god, Devolver to me is one of those. Like, they're known for kind of the edgy indie
Mm-hmm.
titles, like retro kind of stuff, but they're all very different. So um, I know that I will probably like any game that they publish,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily.
Yeah. And talking about as another good example of when a developer kind of betrayed their own brand like that would have been the infamous like Trine debacle that would happen with their third game. They went from the first two games being these 2D or 2.5D puzzle platformers, and then the third game became open world or open ended. They actually it seems smaller than the other games because obviously it costs a lot more to do something in 3D than it is in 2D, and a lot of people felt like they just went in the complete wrong direction for that series.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, and this really goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the cast about or the stream. Like, how what do you do to sustain a property? Do you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, or do you try and radically, redo or reinvent the wheel every time you do a new game in that series? And El Gore just brought up, like Overlord 3, that the first two were these open style third person action games, and then the third game was as a top down beat 'em up or action game that had nothing to do with the other titles.
That's funny. Whenever I hear Overlord, I think of this old school. I know is a different name in Europe, but it was an old school strategy game back in the '90s, early '90s. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
little memory. That's all.
Yep. So, like with that kind of design like that, like how like what do you do when you're trying to keep things going like that? Because again, if you just keep repeating the same thing over and over again, people are going to get bored. But if you go too far out of the box, then you're betraying your fans. And actually, that a really good example, I think, keeping that balance, and I guess it's somewhat topical, is of course Mario. The latest Mario game I think is due out tomorrow, which thankfully, as someone who doesn't have a Switch, means I don't have to be anticipating it just yet.
Yeah.
But the Mario series has kept to a very established formula over the years, but they do everything completely different with each game. But you're still, you know what you're getting into. If I'm buying, Mario Galaxy or Mario Sunshine, I have a reasonable idea of what I'm going to expect there.
Yeah, it is true. They definitely have stamped their a very strong, not, I wouldn't say style, but feel that you get when you play the games. Like when they went from 2D to 3D, that was like, to me, that was a weird leap, and it took me a while to put my head around it because I was so used to Mario being 2D. But I mean, it's still the same kind of platformer. It just really feels right. The example that I bring up with, oh god, was it Epic Mickey? Was that the name of the game that they did? Where they took like the Mickey, like the whole Disney kind of thing, and made it kind of dark.
Yeah, Epic Mickey.
And to me, that's where you kind of are playing with fire a little bit, because you have this brand that's known for a very specific thing, and then you're like, nope, they're evil, or it's dark, or there's something bad happening, and suddenly you have the people who are buying it for Disney being like, what the hell is this? So yeah, you get to that whole fan based reaction, just like what you said and what was mentioned by El Gordo there.
Hmm. Yeah, Epic Mickey. I
Yes.
know he worked. I know Warren Spector did the first one. I don't know if he was a part of the team for number two though.
Yeah, I had a couple of good friends that I used to work with that worked on that project.
Hmm.
Both of them, I guess. So
Yeah.
it imploded. That little company did.
Yeah.
It did.
I
Very
like
interesting.
Epic Mickey. Maybe at some point I can do like a video on it somehow. Did it ever come to the PC?
I don't recall it doing so.
Why is that? Why do I think it did? No, it
It's
couldn't.
possible. I just never.
Oh, the second game did, but never the. But I think the first one was exclusive to the Wii. I want to say. I don't know. Oh, and as Josh saying, Mario's no longer officially a plumber, which
Yeah. Right.
okay then. I guess that's news. And speaking
Yeah.
about having a weird brand, I'm not sure how we got this to work so timely, but Ganma Sujo just made a post that Konami is going to be making a live action movie and TV show based off of Contra.
Sorry.
If I was drinking
Something
my
in my eye.
water when I was reading that, I almost spit that out there. But yeah, like talking about like betraying your brand and stuff, I think Konami has kind of become the poster boy for that for video games. Of course, they did Silent Hill. They made like this isometric. What is with developers with isometric beat 'em up games and trying to kill their brands? They did everyone's favorite, the Metal Gear Solid 3 Pachinko game. Mustache and Hat are Mario brands.
Yeah.
They did that. It was called Alien. Yeah, and Konami has definitely gone some very weird directions. And then, of course, like the Castlevania, they did the whole Castlevania anime, which apparently turned out good from what I've heard.
Well, it is. It's one of those weird things in modern times because I remember in the '90s. Oh my God! If you had a video game that was coming out as a movie, people would just be like, "Why the heck have you not watched the 20 that came before you?" Mario Brothers being like a big one, Mortal Kombat, which was good enough, but like not even you can't even consider that a great movie. Um,
Hmm.
there's so many attempts that all failed, but these days you have like I don't know what you'd call them, but you have teams that are just dedicated to bringing a brand or an intellectual property onto the big screen. Like when you get with Star Wars and Star Trek, you got these guys, Joss Whedon, etc., just embracing this property and bringing out some unique stuff, but also putting in everything that the fans like, at least as far as they can tell.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of teams out there who can do this kind of thing, like you say with Castlevania, but like it is hit and miss. It's not like there are a ton of great video game movies out there, so you're just hoping for the best, but expecting the worst in this case.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about that with the challenges of taking a property and moving it from one medium to another. And I forget, I think his name was Nelson. I think he came on for one of our live streams. And the point that he made is you have to look at what are the major elements of that brand and of that property and translate those. But don't translate what's unique to the medium to another medium because it will never work.
Yeah.
Like going back to like the whole video game thing, like they talk about the Warcraft movie and they try to take this crazy story that made very little sense in the video games, but we're going to turn to a 2.5 hour movie or however long it was. It
Yeah.
just didn't work. Like we brought this up about like the Dark Souls brand would make a really great like movie or TV show, but not it's not just taking Dark Souls and making it with actors. Like just taking within that world and expanding on that front.
It's just got to be a very difficult movie to watch.
Oh yeah, that's gonna very confusing.
Yeah.
I love Laura's comment about the next Mario game they'll be featuring mustache gameplay. Mario's
Yeah.
mustache will become sentient next, and
Yeah.
then for the game after that, the hat and the mustache will combine.
Yeah. There you go.
Mm. Yeah, man.
Interesting.
Yeah, I have heard some fans who are really enjoying that, and but again, like it's always tough when you're trying to do those properties. Like, do I appeal to the fans who maybe make up 5-10% of the audience, or do I try to make this as appealing as possible? And the same thing goes takes us back to video games, and we talked about this before with design, that if you try to make a game that appeals to everybody, chances are it's not going to appeal to anyone, because it's very hard to please all sides.
Yeah, I think in that case with the Warcraft one, you make that choice. Am I going to be making it for general public, or I'm making it for my own fan base? And if for the fan base, will it make enough money to be worthwhile?
Mm-hmm.
So that is another studio decision that has to be made.
Mm-hmm. I love the Dark Souls anime. The character dies, and the next game starts on a bonfire.
That's called Game of Thrones, El Gordo.
And every time, and when you're watching it on Netflix, if you decide to stop it early, you need to get a new Netflix subscription to keep watching the series as well.
Yeah.
Oh man. Let's see. We're just about an hour and a half in. So again, we could probably sit here and chat for another 2-3 hours, but I do have to get to some streaming. I know you probably have to do some work yourself.
Work or dinner, one of those two.
So, and again, this is a topic we can certainly come back to in the future. But I guess any final thoughts about fandom? I guess I'll let you go first, Rob.
I mean, honestly, we came across a lot of it, and it really is. It's a no-win topic. You can't 100% go either way, and certainly I think these days it's harder than ever to really balance those two, because fans are so fanatic, hypomatic. I'll steal that term, but yeah, it is. People are more fanatic than ever, and they're more willing and vocal and angry than ever because internet. And it's just harder. It's just hard. And as a developer, if I ever get to that point where I have hardcore fans, that's a good problem to have. I will have to revisit these videos and then really ponder on these things.
Yeah, lay some ground rules there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, for me, I've never really prescribed to fandom, so I've kind of been able to keep my head out of the issues like that. But yeah, it's always surprises me just how fanatic or hyper, whatever El Gordo's term was here. It's too far. Oh, hypernatic that people get when it comes to these games and to these properties. Like when I hear stories of people going crazy over, again, like Gravity Falls, Steven Universe, or animated stuff like that, I'm like, really? Or when people get so, or I've seen things as well when people are so invested in these stories that they'll write these ridiculously crazy long articles and manifestos about how these characters have to behave like this, or if you don't understand so and so and so, you're not a real fan, or you don't get the real thing. I'm the one who gets it, kind of thing.
Yeah, Disney has those tomes of rules for all their characters. It's very fascinating.
And I'm sure there's even more disturbing things we could talk about, but they'll probably get the live stream flag for sure when it comes to fandom. So, we're going to wrap things up for this week. For those of you watching this right now, let me check our calendar. So, it looks like we're going to miss Halloween by 2 days for our next stream. So I guess next Thursday that will probably be our big horror cast, or the delayed or belated horror cast there. And like I said, for you folks watching this, I'll have some new goals up for Patreon. There's only a few days left this month. We are $1 away from hitting our first $100 tier, so be sure to check that out. Again, if you'd like to join us on the Discord channel, $1 or more a month is all you need to donate. $5 or more gets you VIP for that's good. The Josh fandom going on around here is a nasty example. Yet there's so much drama here between all the Joshes are vying for control, like Game of Thrones. We all have our own seats of power. We're going to be doing power games after this. $5 or more gets you VIP status for voting for any of our major events, including the Saturday Night Grab Bag and Patreon funded as well. Like I said, for people who are donating to Patreon right now, I'll have the the presentation from the other day up in a few days. Game of Josh's. There you go. I think that's it. Let me get HBO on the line. I think we got the next show for them. He sold out. Unfortunately, I don't have the money to sell out. I wish I did there. But that is another discussion entirely. So for tonight, after our stream here, I'll be back with some Darkest Dungeon and maybe some Opus Magnum if there's time. For tomorrow, definitely check out the podcast on Game Wisdom. It'll be my chat with Paul Ritchie and Fred Ford. We talked about the history of Star Control 2, how it came about, and what they're hoping to do with Ghosts of the Precursors. So I'm very excited about that one. I think it was a very great cast.
Awesome.
And for you, Rob, I know you're going away this weekend, but for people watching, if they want to catch you live, what are your times so far?
Actually, right now I'm trying to bump people to RNG Gods TV. That's twitch.tv/RNG Gods TV. That's where I'm going to be streaming for the most part from here on out. I stream on the weekends, 2 p.m. Pacific. I'm trying to switch between a Roller Coaster Tycoon and Torchlight, oddly enough. So, yeah, check me out then when I'm up. And otherwise, there's a bunch of great streamers that post there. I think it's interesting. I think it's a good variety of things to watch.
Nice. And if you enjoyed our live show or you're watching this recorded, we do these Thursday nights regularly around 9:30 EST. We like to go for an hour, but then whenever we get going and there's a lot of people, or when there's at least 2 or more Joshes in chat, that's when we tend to go overboard there. But I think that is going to do. I'm trying to think if there's anything else for right now. Other than, of course, again, check out the Patreon. Come back for daily discussions on game design. And be sure to check out Rob's streams. But I guess for now, thanks again for tuning in. For you live folks, I'll be back on in probably 20 minutes or so for some Darkest Dungeon. And we'll see where the night takes us. So, until our next stream, have a great night, folks. And be sure to check out that podcast.